Greetings. I'm Transport Topics staff reporter Eric Miller. Welcome to today's Live on Web program, the Safe Driver Checklist. Today we'll be talking about truck driver safety from pre-trip to final destination and beyond. During today's program, we invite your participation. You can email your question or comments to share@ttnews.com. If you're watching on the web, you can comment directly in the box at the top of the web page. And if you're watching on Facebook Live, simply enter your question in the comment box. To help provide perspective on the issue, we are joined by one of the industry's top professional drivers and the president of the largest association representing commercial truck driver training programs. First, let me introduce Don Biggerstaff, a professional driver with ABF Freight who has accumulated more than 1.5 million accident-free miles during his 22 years behind the wheel. Don has been with ABF Freight for 37 years and is a recipient of ABF's 25-year Safe Driving Award. He also is an America's Road Team captain. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Eric.
Second, we welcome Don Lefeve, President and CEO of the Commercial Vehicle Training Association. Don is CVAT's chief advocate before Congress, the White House, and federal regulatory agencies. He joined CVTA in 2013 and brought over 15 years of government relations and political experience to his post. Don, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Eric.
And later, via Skype, we'll get a fleet perspective on driver safety from Brett Sant, Senior Vice President of Safety and Risk Management for Knight Transportation in Phoenix. I'd like to start the conversation with a question to Don Biggerstaff. How the heck do you drive 1.5 million miles without an accident, Don?
Well, Eric, for me, it's just it's what's in front of you at the time. It's the next mile you have to face. I can't really do anything about the miles that I've already traveled. I can't do anything about the miles that are way down the road. I just use my training and my experience and my skill to drive the truck right where I'm at right now. And you just keep putting those miles behind you, and it's just like saving pennies. They add up to dollars. But for me, it's a sense of pride. I was raised, my dad worked in the trucking industry, and my family was raised by the trucking industry. So, and when I got married, my wife's dad drove a truck. So it's just a sense of pride for me. I remember the first time that I went out on the road for my company. I was so proud, and I made a point at that time that I was going to do the best I could to be safe, because I never want to hurt anybody, and to be safe and make my family proud. And you know, every time I leave, before I go out the gate, I always say a little prayer, and the Lord's honored that. And I've been safe all this time. So 1 mile at a time, Eric.
Yeah, I knew you'd have a modest answer. Don Lefeve, in your opinion, are drivers born or made?
They're made. Well, clearly, you know, some students, when they come to training schools, we notice that some take to certain skills and learn certain skills at a faster rate. But ultimately, it's about training, it's about repetition, and it's about proficiency. So I'd have to say they're made.
And for any wannabe truck drivers, do you have any tips on how to choose a driver training school with a good credential?
Well, selfishly, I would urge them to go to cvta.org and obviously choose a CVTA school. But there are others out there. For example, National Association of Publicly Funded Truck Driving Schools have great schools, as do PTDI, Professional Truck Driver Institute schools.
Is there a accrediting agency for CVTA?
Certification, but some of our schools are accredited as well. That's kind of a term of art in the education world, but yeah, we do have rigorous standards that they must adhere to.
And I thought we'd start off the program with some situations that truck drivers commonly face on the highway, and they have the potential to turn ugly. And some of the comment boards I've looked at by drivers, they've had some common situations. One of them, which I'd like to talk to Don about, some drivers say that entering and exiting an interstate is perhaps the most dangerous part of truck driving. Wanted to get your feelings on that.
it can potentially be a hazardous situation. But usually when I turn on to an on-ramp, I try to size up the ramp. Some are a lot longer than others. Some are shorter. If you've got a long ramp where you can get your speed up to preferably traffic speed before you get in, and as you're going down the ramp, you turn your signal light on, whichever way you're going to merge in, to let people know that you're coming on. And when you get parallel with your lane, you look in your mirror and you gauge the opening that you need to have. And most of the time people will accommodate a truck and will move over for them. So you just pick your spot and you merge in. If you've got a shorter ramp, you can't get up quite as much speed. And sometimes it pays maybe to glance back out of your window and see what's coming, because sometimes you don't have time for your mirror to get in position to see what's coming. So, but you always, no matter what the situation is, you have to be prepared to slow down or either come to a stop should there not be a place to merge in. But most of the time, people accommodate a truck on that.
Good advice. I know many drivers have an urge sometimes to speed a little bit. I've been going down the highways and seen them going pretty fast. And by far, speeding is the #1 citation that are issued to truck drivers by law enforcement. And I wonder how you balance the urge to get to your next destination on time with safety and driving at a safe speed.
Just training and a concern for safety. You just have to, when you get out on the highway, you have to value what you do, your equipment, your life, and everybody else's life on the highway. You just have to put the value there, and it's just not worth it. And statistics show the faster you go, the more inclined you are to be in an accident. So that's not a good thing. And so, and another thing. 4 points on your license and a hefty ticket don't help a lot. So that's a pretty good discouragement.
Absolutely. Don, you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that Don said, but I'd also like to add, I mean, you also have to think about the career longevity, and tickets and infractions potentially could affect your career long term. So it's not worth it. It's not worth it for the safety reasons as he articulated, but also from your career standpoint. Mm-hmm. So
good advice. Many drivers consider approaching an intersection as a potential danger. Any thoughts, Don, on how to do that?
It is slow down. Most of the time when you're coming to an intersection, always reduce your speed, because it's a place where cars come to a stop and they're taking off constantly, they're stopping constantly, and you like to think that everybody obeys the stoplights and the stop signs and things, but you just can't take that chance. So slowing down is my best advice in entering an intersection.
Okay. Any thoughts?
Defensive driving.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just practice it.
Yeah. Don, I've heard that I heard it said that a good driver is kind of like an NFL quarterback. He has to be able to read the defense. To stay safe on the highways. How do you learn to anticipate possible changes in the weather and situations and speeds and such?
Me?
Yes.
Just constantly staying prepared, because conditions change when you're out there on the highway. Things can be fine now, and 20 miles down the road they change considerably. Traffic congestion, traffic can stop. You have weather situations that change drastically. So it comes with training. You're trained to observe those things, to stay alert, and to stay focused. And it's really, that's what it's about, being focused and having your attention on the road and being ready for those potential changes in conditions, because they happen. And construction areas are extremely one that you need to be cautious in, because you're going pretty close sometimes to people who are working on the roads, and always obey those signs. Whatever the sign, speed limit is, and lane changes, follow those to a T, because it's not for your safety as much as it is for those that are working. So, but you just have to constantly observe the highway, pay attention, keep your eyes moving, don't get fixed on anything, and just be ready for the unexpected.
Mm-hmm. Is there any way to teach anticipation? Is it a part of the curriculum?
Yeah, absolutely. And a large part of our classroom learning it in the classroom and then applying it out on the open road. It's actually built off of the what's known as the Smith system, excuse me. And again, as I articulated earlier, I think it's fundamentally based on defensive driving as well. And it's just being a professional, learning to scan the road, anticipate threats, always looking at your mirrors, and just expect the unexpected and really learn how to anticipate that. So look far down the road.
We got a few questions from some of our viewers that might be appropriate at this point in the discussion. Dennis Petit, who is an instructor for Vincennes University LTech, asks, how do we combat boredom going down the road? Don, I think you might have a...
Well, I can think of a few ways. Most trucks have radios, and usually there's something on the radio, some kind of music people like to listen to that they can find, talk radio, different things on the radio. My company still allows us to use the Bluetooth headsets with the one button push. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes, coming up the road, I'm feeling kind of tired, I could call a friend and talk to a friend going up the road, and before you know it, you're 50 or 100 miles up the road and you're feeling good. So that's one way. But basically it goes back to training. You've got to keep your head moving. You've got to be looking at new objects all the time. You're checking your mirrors every 5 to 8 seconds. And when you keep your head moving and you're seeing new things, you don't get as bored because you're doing the job that you're out there to do. So go back to your training and keep your head moving.
Do you do any training on this aspect of driving?
I think it's all about being a professional. Yeah, I mean, you have to, like we were talking about earlier, just keep scanning, keep your head moving. But that's the challenge, and that's really why this is a skilled profession. And I think that anybody watching and anybody in this industry knows that part of being that professional is combating boredom, or perceived boredom. So.
Mm-hmm. And we had a question from Burl Tate, who is the owner of Burl Tate Consulting Service. He asked, what's the proper way to make a safe right-hand turn at an intersection? Don, you may have some advice on this one.
Well, my training tells me when I'm approaching the intersection and I get up there to almost to the intersection where I'm going to turn, I keep my trailer within 4 feet of the curb on the right-hand side, because I know I'm going to have to swing out to make that turn. And that keeps somebody from coming up and wanting to cut me off on the right-hand side and potentially putting them in a dangerous situation. So I keep the trailer over there, and then you take what you need to make the turn safely without getting your tandems up on the curb or hitting a fire hydrant or guide wires as you turn the corner. But you still have to be persistent in looking in your mirrors, because sometimes if they get a break, cars will want to merge up on your right-hand side, and when you're turning, that puts them in a very hazardous situation. So, but trying to keep your trailer to the curb and putting your signal light on so they know what you're doing.
Yeah, that's a maneuver that I'm really impressed with when I see drivers make that. And Chris Throp, who's a VP at Sage Schools, asked, what resources do you recommend for training drivers online? And I think, Don, maybe you might have a suggestion.
Yeah, there are two. First is Mike Burns and Associate. They do the bumper to bumper. I know that they have a new online product. Also, JJ Keller is another widely known and used producer of online and videos and all sorts of curriculum. So I would check out Mike Burns or JJ Keller.
Good suggestions. Yeah, and at this point, we're going to talk a little bit about the safe driver list that you two had prepared for us, and you had some very interesting comments. And we want to first get to what a driver should do before they get in the truck. And Don, you had some suggestions, three good suggestions. Mm-hmm. Wondered if you could discuss them a little bit. Yeah. First, pre-trip the equipment.
Okay. Yeah, pre-tripping the equipment is one of the most important things I think a driver can do before he leaves. That's the last stop. That equipment's going to get checked before it hits the highway. And it's just so important. And I try to encourage drivers to drill down a little bit on the pre-trip instead of just get in the casual walk around and glance. Sometimes it pays to bend over and look underneath the trailer, see if any trash is hung up under there, any braces that might be loose, nuts loose, brake chambers loose. Check your spring hangers, just to drill down on those. And you can make pre-trips fun in a way. I know that kind of sounds funny, but you're looking for something that you don't want to find. But if you find it, you're a winner. Not only you, but the people on the highway. And this equipment, it travels 2,000-3,000 miles a week sometimes, and things happen. It's mechanical, and if you can catch something small, which sometimes turns into things big, you might save a costly breakdown on the highway. And maybe even more important than that, you might save an accident on the highway. So there's just not enough to be said about a good pre-trip.
Mm-hmm. And you also said to understand the day's job requirements.
That's correct. A professional driver needs to understand, what his company expects out of him. Doing his job by the rules. When he comes to work, he needs to, know where he's going, know the routes, make sure everything is right. Check your paperwork. Make sure it's right so you don't pull the wrong trailers to the wrong destinations. That has happened sometimes, and that's not a good feeling, not by me, but it has happened. And what's expected of you at each location, know what your company policies are, and be well prepared to perform the duties that's expected out of you.
And you also said to start out with a clear head. Don't go to work angry.
That's true. I don't normally get angry. I know everybody has their own set of problems and issues. If I have anything bearing on my mind, I usually try to clear that up on the way to work. It's just not a good thing to get in the truck with your emotions driving the truck. It's just not a good situation. If you're angry, you need to take a few minutes and get things in order and get settled down. There's just too much at stake out there on the highway, and your attention is needed too much on the road to be distracted by your mind. So I made a point never to leave the gate without a clear head. If I need to talk to somebody or calm down a little bit, then I'll do that before I go out on the highway. It's just not worth the risk.
Good advice. And interestingly enough, great minds think alike. And Don Lefeve, you also say to, before you start out on the road, to plan your trip.
Yeah, plan your trip. Plan out your route. Plan where you're going to take your break. Understand the geography you're going to be going through. The other thing, as we kind of talked about, or Don mentioned, was then pre-trip the vehicle. It's the first thing you should always do. And then while you're he covered all the reasons, I think, why you need to do a thorough pre-trip, but also pre-trip yourself. I think it's important to make sure, do you have your license? Do you have everything you need before you go on the trip? So just pre-trip yourself along with the vehicle.
Okay. And we also had you two list your 3 tips on when you get in, after you're in the truck and on the road. And I know, Don, you said to fasten your seatbelt.
Yeah. Number one for me, that's you have to make that a good habit. I mean, that just has to come automatic. I believe seatbelts save lives. It keeps you in your seat. It keeps you steering the truck. I mean, you could get in a situation where without your seatbelt, you could be thrown in a position where you wouldn't have control of the truck. But with a seatbelt, it keeps you in there. Not only keeps you safe in case of an impact, it just keeps you safe because you have control of the truck. And I'm thankful that the seatbelt use is on the increase. I think that's a good thing in any industry. And so it's number one for me when I get in the truck.
It's important, yeah. And you also said when you're in the cab to stay focused and don't allow distractions.
Very important. Distracted driving nowadays is a very big issue. And a lot of people kind of, think mostly of electronic devices and cell phones and things like that when they think of distracted driving, and that's true. It is, but a number of things can distract you when you're in the truck. It might be that apple that rolled off the dash or something you're trying to reach. It could be your mind, like we talked earlier. People get things on their mind, so there's a number of distractions that can come your way. You just have to, through your training, and through your concern for safety, you just have to learn that they can't be a part of your day. You can't let them get in your way of driving the truck safely. So you have to stay focused.
And you also said when you're in the cab, be aware of the changing conditions on the road.
That is correct. Like I said a while ago, that conditions change, especially like the wintertime, weather changes. You go 50 miles and it's good. The next 50 miles may be terrible. I've been in that situation, and you kind of have to be ready for those. You kind of have to be aware of ahead of time if there's a possibility of that. Speed limit changes. We mentioned before going through construction sites. I don't know anywhere now that I travel that they're not doing construction, which I'm thankful for the smooth roads that they're making. But we just have to deal with that. It's part of our job. It's part of being out there every day. And traffic congestion, depending on what time of day, you get a lot of that. So there's just all kinds of conditions that can change, and so you just have to be aware of those.
Mm-hmm. And Don, you also said to concentrate on your driving. Keep your mind on your driving.
Keep your mind on your driving, like Don said. No distractions. Whether that's the technology or even your own thoughts. Like you said, just be a pro and keep your mind on driving. Another thing is just to be alert. I think he said that, and we articulated that over and over here. It's very important to expect the unexpected. And I think one of the things when you're on the road, and obviously one of the leading cause of accidents is fatigue, and be aware of fatigue and when you're tired, and stop if necessary.
Good points. And when you're off duty, you kind of have to take care of yourself, I guess. And Don, you said that getting ample rest for the next day is really important.
Yeah, that is very important for a truck driver. A lot of truck drivers know when they go out the next time. Some don't. If you're on a schedule where you do know, then you have to adjust your rest period to where you're going to be well rested when you go out. Sometimes for drivers who are not certain, that might be just a little bit harder, but nevertheless, you have to make sure you have enough rest when you're going out for the next trip. You look at that as soon as you leave this trip, you have to start planning for the next trip to be prepared for that.
Mm-hmm. And you also said to stay alert by exercising and eating smart.
Yeah, I think you need to maintain a healthy lifestyle, such as diet and exercise. I think in any occupation that you get in, or you're in, a healthy employee is a better employee. Mm-hmm. I believe that. So you need to take care of yourself. And when you take care of yourself and you're healthy, it helps you stay focused. Because, sometimes we sit in the seat for 8, 9, 10, 11 hours. It's not physically straining sometimes, but it's mentally straining. And I think the better health you're in, the better you'll be able to adapt to those conditions and stay focused on the highway.
Good. And you also said stay up on industry changes, new regulations and such.
Yeah, as a professional driver, that's something we have to do. This industry changes a lot, and it changes quickly sometimes. And so we have to stay up with the regulations and what's required of us, not only federally, but our company policies as well, what they are, our guidelines for what we should do within the company. So, yeah, stay informed of the industry. That's an obligation of the professional truck driver.
Mm-hmm. And Don, you also had some emphasis on getting good rest.
Absolutely. Get your rest. Get your rest to drive your best, as I say. So. Reiterate what Don says. Also, do some physical activity, and even just taking a short walk, I think, is really important to kind of get the blood moving. And then, last thing I would say is, plan a healthy meal, and make sure that you're taking care of your body and eating right. So, obviously, planning a good meal before a healthy meal is important for wellness.
Good advice. Next, we're going to play an interview I did yesterday with Brent Sant, Senior VP of Safety and Risk Management for Knight Transportation. Mr. Sant has been with Knight in his current role since 2005. He's been actively involved in ATA's Safety Management Council and recently finished a term as a member of American Transportation Research Institute's Advisory Committee. Do you have a specific characteristics of drivers that you look for when they come in the door?
Well, you know, that's a great question. We hire drivers of varying experience backgrounds. Our normal hiring would involve hiring only experienced drivers, but we have programs set up, training programs that enable us to hire drivers who lack experience, and drivers who are obtaining their CDL for the first time. So experience for us is not the most important factor. Skill and proficiency are. So we'll take people of varying experience backgrounds, and we will provide the training that they need in order to ensure that when they're on the highway, they're prepared and qualified and competent. So we have all kinds of solutions to help drivers obtain and become proficient in driving the equipment. And I think that's one of the other areas where investment is needed by motor carriers, is in training. You've seen it with the entry-level driver training rule, which is good in that it's proficiency based. We agree that it should be proficiency based. We also provide behind the wheel and classroom defensive driving training. So all of our drivers are trained in defensive driving techniques and principles, and they do that training both behind the wheel and in a classroom. So we think that is an important facet of our safety program. When we started doing defensive driving training in 2007, within 2 years we had seen close to a 50% reduction in DOT recordable accidents. But it requires a commitment. It requires a financial commitment. It requires a commitment to take the time and dedicate the resources necessary to provide that training to your drivers. But we believe there's a lot of value in doing that. So if you were to ask me, you know, the key pieces of our safety program, it would be higher standards for individuals. When we look to hire individuals, though we can train people of varying experience backgrounds, we are pretty stringent when it comes to personal characteristics and character. Those things are very hard to train, so we look for those in all of our employees. And then we work hard with our partners in the supply chain to create more efficiencies for our truck drivers. Again, in the grand scheme of things, we need to increase driver wages. We need to be able to attract and retain the best people for this industry, and to do that, we need to eliminate a lot of the inefficiencies in the supply chain. And then finally, we make significant investments in technologies. I mentioned the ELDs. We also invest in collision avoidance systems, electronic stability control systems. We also have invested in in-cab event recorders, and we see a very decisive impact on driver performance and safety with the investment in those technologies. Technology won't solve all of our problems alone, but they are important. They're depending on the technologies we're talking about, they're providing an increased level of protection to our drivers and to the motoring public. Certainly, there is a lot that you can do as an individual motor carrier to leverage those technologies effectively. On a standalone basis, the technology may or may not be innately effective, though we think it is, but it's even more powerful when it's leveraged properly by the motor carrier.
Are there ways that you monitor drivers and that shows how the technology might pay off? Do you keep data on those kinds of things?
Yeah, we keep a lot of data. I think a lot like a lot of large companies, and we're a large publicly owned company. We have tremendous volumes of data. Part of the challenge is learning how to use that data effectively, and we're certainly getting better at that as a company. And I think as an industry, we're getting better at using data. But what we try to do with our technology is to get inside the cab and to see how our drivers are performing, and to base our success not on whether or not there is a collision, but on how well the driver fundamentally operates the equipment from a safety standpoint. And we use the data to help us establish what the driver is doing behind the wheel, and to provide the driver the kind of feedback that they need as individuals to improve their skills. And that requires an investment in technologies. We started last year installing in-cab event recorders in our equipment. We've been pretty vocal about that in our industry, and we see a pronounced improvement among the fleets who have installed those event recorders versus the uninstalled portion of the fleet. I attribute that to the fact that we are really providing the driver very prescriptive, real-time information to help them improve their driving skills. Now, again, if the motor carrier is not disciplined about using that information and is unwilling to hold individuals accountable for the things they should be responsible for, it may not have much value. But you've got to make that investment in technology first and foremost before you can leverage it. And how you leverage it is really what distinguishes one motor carrier from another.
We're back live. A reminder to our viewers that you're watching live on Web's Safe Driver Checklist. We invite viewers to contribute questions or comments. You can send them to share@ttnews.com or make them directly on the article page if you're watching on the web, or in the comment box if you're watching on Facebook Live. We're going to turn to a few more questions from viewers for our panel here. Billy McKillen, president of Royal Trucking Company, asked the question, now that we have the driver safety checklist, how do we get our drivers to use it? Got any ideas on that?
Yeah, well, a number of fleets obviously, will have these checklists for their drivers. If you're an owner-operator, I would say, take what we've done on this webinar, write it down, and laminate it, and keep it in your truck.
And Greg Alsop, a trainer recruiter at Marvin Keller Trucking, asked, what are the best ways to get experienced drivers to really get on board with safety? Don, I think you had a few thoughts on that.
Yeah, we hope that our experienced drivers are on board with safety. But, to set an example, I try to do things the right way and not cut any corners. Take no shortcuts. When you're working with somebody, an employee, and you see them and they're not taking any shortcuts and they're doing the right thing, it kind of ups your level a little bit, and you always try to set an example. But I think safety awards are a good item to get experienced drivers on board. Some kind of rewards for driving safe, because if they've driven safe, they've been a benefit to their company and they've made their company money. So I think maybe in situations where they're working for companies, to just maybe recognize them and appreciate them for what they've done and with safety.
Good suggestion. Don, you have any thoughts on that?
I think when, I'll give one example. I know a lot of drivers typically have always driven manual transmissions. A lot of the fleets that are members of CBTA are now transitioning over to automatics. And what we're starting to see is obviously kind of an older generation who would have swore they would have never driven an automatic. Once they get an opportunity to drive it, they won't give it up. And I think that technology to a point can enhance the role of the driver, and just have an open mind and be willing to look at that sort of stuff.
And while you're on the subject, are there certain elements that you always include in curriculum to make sure that drivers are safe? Is there a prescribed course for that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, a lot of what the entry-level driver training rule, the curriculum that was adopted as part of that regulation, really is focused on safety. And I think that there's a big distinction between teaching safety as opposed to simply passing a CDL skills exam or even a commercial learner's permit exam. It's actually much more extensive, the curriculum that we teach, but both in the classroom and on the road. So obviously you have to learn it, you have to then go practice it, and then you have to be proficient at it. So there's just a lot of things that safety is a culture, and we try to instill that early and often.
And Don, what do you, driving a truck is not an easy job. What do you think is some of the most challenging aspects of driving a truck?
Well, once we've had our training and once we we know what to do and doing the right thing, I think hopefully we don't get complacent, but repetition, doing the same things, and it's what you're supposed to do, the same things over and over each day. And the temptation maybe to cut a corner here or cut a corner there, and we shouldn't do that. We should go through the full process of our pre-trip and our driving down the highway in the correct manner. And on the flip side of that, repetition is a good thing. The more you do something, the better you get at it. So staying in your routine of what you know to do, the way you've been trained to do, the way you've been trained to drive, and your pre-trip, and that's one of the things I think is the biggest thing. Just don't cut any corners, and do what you know to do.
Mm-hmm. And Don, you're a lawyer, and as a part of your profession, you have to do continuing training. Is that important for truck drivers to get continuous training throughout their career?
Yeah, I think so. And what I've noticed when I've gone out to visit our fleets, our carrier members, I was actually I was struck by how much they dedicate towards safety and continuous training. Obviously, there's, from what I hear, the driver that gets complacent or the driver that thinks he or she knows it all, that's when you got to be worried the most, because that's when accidents happen. Mm-hmm. And as an industry, I mean, we spend $9.6 billion a year on safety. So I know, obviously, the fleets take this very, very, very serious.
Mm-hmm. And Don, do you have any concerns when you head out in the morning? I know it's kind of a routine thing for you, but is there something that concerns you when you have to get out in that congested traffic?
Well, when you drive day to day like that, you're going to see some aggressive drivers and you're going to see some impatient drivers. You can't control that. If they're out there, they're out there. The only thing I can control is what I do. Thank goodness I'm not scared to get out on the highway. I enjoy that, but we just have to do what we've been trained to do. We have to be courteous, not tailgate, leave plenty of room, and just do the things that that professional truck drivers should do to stay safe on the highway. What other people do, hopefully we won't get involved and affected by that. But really, I'm responsible for what I do on the highway, and as long as I do what I do in the right manner, that's what's important to me. And really, basically, in my capability, that's all I can do, is the best I can do.
Mm-hmm. And Don, right now, there's a stay on any regulatory developments for 60 days that President Trump has signed an executive order. And I wonder if a good part of truck driver training is regulatory aspects. Trucking is one of the most regulated industries there is. And I wonder if it's making drivers safer, in your opinion.
Well, couple of points. First, obviously, entry-level driver training was the final rule came out in December of 2016, and it's likely going to fall into this regulatory freeze. At least that's what we're hearing. And that's been been battled for between Congress, the courts, and the DOT for a number of years, over 20 in fact. That will go forward, and we anticipate that it will become law by the law of the land by 2020. I think it's one of the things that we've focused on, and that's really important to our schools, in fact, is a little lesser known issue that we've seen in a number of states, and it actually deals with not over-regulating, but this is actually an instance where we don't have a proper regulation. And for all the viewers out there and all the drivers, anytime anybody has a commercial learner's permit, you can only ride with somebody who has a CDL. Ironically, though, when you go to actually test for your skills test, a number of examiners in states don't actually hold the CDL themselves. And this is something that we kind of just scratch our heads and try to understand why. So, from the CBTA standpoint, we think that, within 5 years, all examiners should hold CDLs. Now, many do. Many that are third-party testers will have CDLs, but it actually creates a very big problem, and that's examiner inconsistency. And it happens in every state, and it's something that we're obviously, supportive of, making sure that all examiners have CDLs.
And Don, you obviously have to know your stuff on regulatory issues. Any of them out there that you'd quibble with, or that maybe are a little too restraining, or?
Well, I trust our lawmakers to make the regulations that keep our industry safe, and I just abide by them. I mean, it's just that's my job. So I don't really have any quibbles with any of them personally.
Okay. And to both of you, speed limiters, there's going to be another supplemental rule coming out, I think, on that. It's really controversial. I wonder what you think about that. Is that going to, Don, you actually are governed, and your trucks are actually governed. Is this going to be a good thing for safety?
I think it will be. Our trucks are governed at about 63, 64 mile an hour, and I'm thankful for that, because it's been proven that the faster you go, the more likely you are to be in an accident. And so it's just a safety issue for me. And I've noticed you don't really, if you gain 5, 6, 7 mile an hour, sometimes at the end of a several 100-mile trip, you hadn't made up but 5 or 10 minutes. It's really not that important. So it's, to me, I think it'll be safer. Yes.
Any thoughts on it, Don?
I know that it's a little bit of a controversial issue with amongst or within the industry. Thankfully, we don't have to. We haven't taken a position on it, so I'll just stay quiet.
Yeah, it can get political, can it? And I guess I wanted to talk generally about technology and drivers. You've obviously experienced some of the technology. I wonder if you could comment on what you think about it and the various types of technology that you find helpful.
Well, technology is it's a great thing. I think it's made the trucks a lot safer. Our trucks do personally have the anti-rollover systems on them, our newer trucks. And have got the opportunity to go to some of these Bendix demonstrations about 4 times, and actually ride in the truck with the Bendix driver and experience that firsthand, and the collision mitigation system and the anti-rollover, and where they actually try to turn the truck over. And to be in that when they do that is quite an experience, and then see how it operates when they turn that system on and the difference it's made. So Yeah, those two there are great. The lane departure warning system, I think, is a good one. It keeps the driver who may be a little drowsy, who is going to veer off the highway, it wakes him up. So I've experienced, we do have those too. I've experienced those. Speed limiters, our trucks are governed. We don't have cameras in the truck right now. But for most of the technology that I've seen and I have got to experience, I like it. I think it makes the driver and everybody on the highway safer.
Any dangers in relying on technology, or is there an inclination to do that?
Well, possibly, but as a professional driver, all this technology leaves the control of the truck ultimately in the hands of the driver. So the driver has to realize that he is in control. These systems here are just assistance to the driver, and they're beneficial and they're helpful. They're kind of reminders to the driver, but the driver, professional driver, has to ultimately remember that he's in control of the truck, period.
And Don, is there any training in new technology at schools?
This is actually something we're looking at right now with the adoption of new technology. In essence, drivers are becoming more like pilots, and how do we're taking the early steps right now to kind of address this with our schools, and we'll be reaching out to OEMs to kind of figure out what how this technology, what we should teach. Interestingly enough, for something like ELDs, we've actually we do use, a number of schools use ELDs. But what we've been told from certain fleets is don't teach it in a generic sense, but don't teach it for a particular model over another model, because depending on where the student will go, they might have to unlearn what they already learned. These are sort of things that generally are covered by the fleet in finishing school. But we are starting to look at this issue kind of from the ground level. I mean, we can't forget, we're generally taking drivers who have zero experience other than driving a car and trying to instill the skills to be proficient within, call it 4 to 6 weeks. So jamming too much technology talk in there would arguably be counterproductive. But seeing that this is becoming adopted a lot more, or being adopted quicker, we do have to look at this, and we'll be doing so in the next couple months.
It's pretty fast moving, isn't it? And on this topic, we had a few questions from our viewers. Roger Nicoderm, Regional Safety Manager for Transwood Transportation, asked, do you have any proven tips for helping drivers accept or embrace collision avoidance and anti-rollover technologies? Don?
Well, for me personally, thankfully, like I said earlier, I've had a chance to see firsthand how that operates, and I'm able to pass that along to other drivers. I think other drivers is probably the best way for drivers to learn about that and understand it, instead of a pamphlet or an engineer telling them about it. If they see a truck somewhere in a truck stop, it maybe has that kind of stuff on it, ask a driver about it. Talking to other drivers that have experienced it and actually know firsthand what it does for them, I think that's the best way to communicate it to other drivers.
And Mark Adams, the Safety Director at Sharp Transportation, wonders, how do you help longtime drivers understand that the new technology can actually improve their safety? Is that a challenge, Don?
It may be. There again, I think with older drivers and drivers that have used the new technology. Like I say, people are willing to listen to maybe a coworker who has experienced something, or another truck driver from another company, and give them statistics. Have meetings with them and give them statistics on how that this new technology is actually helping them. Show the decrease in accidents and things like that, and make them aware that there is progress in this area with technology. And I think once they say those two things and talking to drivers, I think they'll be more able to accept it.
Yeah, there is a lot of research, and it's showing generally that these technologies are helping safety. Matthew Drake who is a program manager at Smart Drives, asked what can be done legislatively to provide incentives to companies that invest in driver training and safety tools and technologies. I know FMCSA is looking for suggestions on how carriers can get credit for, for deploying systems before they're actually regulated. Any thoughts on that?
Honestly, a lot of this is driven by the tax code, and because if you're going to buy a new truck that has or it's equipped with all these safety features, you can utilize the tax code to depreciate it faster. So I would say from an industry standpoint, it's something obviously as President Trump has talked about, and I know Congress is looking at tax reform this summer. It's something that we as an industry need to pay attention to and just understand, there's a carrot and the stick, right? Mm-hmm. So this is certainly a carrot, and you can influence market behavior and the quicker adoption of certain technology.
Mm-hmm. And Caitlin Grease, night operations manager at Circle 8 Logistics, wonders, do you think electronic log compliance will be enforced in December? You might have some thoughts on that, Don?
I do. Yeah, I do.
What are those thoughts?
No comment.
Okay, and before we leave the checklist and stuff, and we talked a little bit about driver health, I'm sure you know that sleep apnea is a very big issue, really on FMCSA's radar right now. It's been controversial in some ways. Drivers, if they're found to be at risk for sleep apnea, have to take an in-lab sleep test at a lab, and that's costly. It takes them away from their work. I wondered if you had any thoughts on this, Don, on
Yeah, I do.
some of the challenges.
Yeah, I mean, certainly this is in the proposed rulemaking. Actually, I think it's in the advanced rulemaking stage. And there has been so much confusion for the last couple of years surrounding this issue that a lot of it centers around what your body mass index is, and then the FMCSA has asked a number of questions, has outlined a number of factors that potentially could be warning signs, like if you're 43, if you're male, if you have a size 17 neck or 15.5 as a woman, if anybody's ever witnessed a sleep apnea or apneic event. Sleep apnea is a very serious condition. Our concern, however, is that too many, obviously we're on the side of safety. I mean, that has to be the overarching goal. But we feel that a lot of individuals are getting pushed to go get a sleep apnea test that otherwise may not need one. Now, if an individual has either had a prior episode or something, yeah, I mean, they should certainly get screened for it. But these tests are very expensive, and you could potentially take somebody away from their livelihood to go get tested, and then pay for a CPAP machine, which is not cheap. So that's our concern. Is there potential over screening on this issue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know FMCSA's medical board has recommended that if a driver has 3 or more of 11 conditions, that they be declared at risk, be referred to a sleep study. Don, is this something that drivers talk about or are concerned with at all from what you see?
Well, I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard the conversation before. It's a concern. I guess nothing's been said on it yet, so the talk's kind of lessened, I guess, over the last short while. But it has been discussed. Some drivers are concerned with that. They really are. I don't know a whole lot about the criteria for that sleep apnea, but I do know that FMCSA, as everybody knows, is taking a hard look at drivers' health. And that's why I think exercise and fitness is vitally important for a driver to stay in as good a shape as he can, and maybe eliminate some of those conditions that Don was
Exactly.
talking about
Actually,
here.
exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah.
It refocuses the importance on health and wellness. And I know that there's a gentleman by the name of Bob Perry, Rolling Strong. Bob is a huge advocate of wellness. When I know fleets that have focused on this and have run individuals who, for one reason or another, were disqualified from driving. They go through a program with Bob, and he's gotten them back on the road and back into their, earning a living. And I think it's really important. I think more and more companies, individuals, drivers are starting to recognize how important health and wellness is to your longevity of your career. And obviously it saves dollars and cents, not only for the company, you personally extend your life. And, I think there's equally as important of bringing new drivers in. It's also keeping those that we can keep out on the road and keep driving.
And before we close, any general thoughts or last minute thoughts about what you should impart to drivers about safety?
Just value the importance of it. Safety is. We talk about it everywhere. We talk about it within our companies, within the industry. I just like drivers to value that and place that as first priority in whatever they're doing, whether it's before they get ready to leave or when they're out there on the highway, and while they're at home and doing something other than trucking. Safety is what it's cracked up to be. I just put it that way, and I just like to see drivers really place that in high priority.
Any thoughts on what we may have missed here?
I just reiterate, obviously the importance of safety, but also safety through training, and not just your initial training where we're involved, but also continuous training throughout your career.
Great. Well, gentlemen, those are some great tips, and I appreciate you joining us today for our Live on Web program on the Safe Driver Checklist. Many thanks to Don Biggerstaff of ABF Freight and Don Lefeve of CVTA for joining us today. And I want to thank everyone who watched or sent in questions as well. If you missed part of the show or would like to watch it again, a replay will be posted later today on our website, ttnews.com, and our live on web liveonweb.ttnews.com. Our next Live on Web program is scheduled for March 8th, when we will explore the latest ideas around driver recruitment and retention issues. Until next time, I'm Eric Miller of Transport Topics. Thanks again for watching.